Okay, so we have the top on. Hey everyone, we are back in the breakfast nook, and if you've been following along, I converted this useless 60 square foot gross beige space off of my kitchen into a super bright and functional breakfast nook with a coffee bar. When I look at this half of the breakfast nook, I absolutely love it. I think it looks amazing, and it's so close to what I had envisioned for this space. It's happy, modern, bright, and functional, and just feels like such a vibe with plenty of storage and places to showcase all of my functional thrifted decor. And I just really enjoy making coffee in here every morning. But if you're a renter like me and can't purchase the home of your dreams or renovate, you probably have experienced the frustration of not always having a place for all of your things, even if you're a minimalist and don't have a lot. And the one thing that has been so frustrating in this home since the day I moved in is there's just not a lot of storage. This home was built in 1929, so it's old and everything is really small and not made for the modern world. There's no official laundry room, pantry, or utility closet, so we have a lot of random but necessary items that just don't have a home and kind of create a lot of clutter. So I want to create a permanent home for these things. Plus, my original dream for this space was to have a super cool and modern window bench, but after searching for months on Facebook Marketplace for something that would fit this space and my style, I really just could not find anything, especially something that was affordable. So I'm just gonna do what I always do and DIY it myself. I am new to large-scale woodworking and furniture building, and I don't have a lot of specialty tools in my garage. I just basically have a circular saw and a miter saw. So I'm very grateful that my brother-in-law Dalton is going to kind of mentor me through this process, as he's a very skilled woodworker himself. He also recently discovered this free 3D modeling app that can help really bring my bench vision to life. Using this app, we were able to enter in my ideal dimensions for the bench and decide where some additional 2x4s would need to go in order to support the weight of multiple people, while also taking into consideration that I would need ample space to include the things that I was hoping to store in the bench. So this 3D design made it really easy to know how much wood I would need to go buy so I wouldn't have to waste any money. So Dalton is picking up those 2x4s, bringing them over to the house, and we're gonna jump into it. So I feel that I have to note that the giant dirty drop cloth over the amorphous subject in the background is just a bunch of projects that I've been working on that don't fit into the garage at the moment. Even though it looks kind of gross and messy, please ignore that. The next step to building the frame was to add pocket holes on each side of the 2x4s that we cut down in order to connect them to each other. Pocket holes are also really helpful to make this frame super sturdy. So I was really glad that Dalton brought over his pocket hole jig, and overall this was a pretty easy but repetitive process, so it took quite a while. Now that we have all these pocket holes, we're going to start connecting one piece of the frame. We started with building the top of the short side of the bench, and it's kind of like building little ladders then connecting them into a square. It would be really hard to do this alone, so I'm really glad that Dalton was able to hold everything together while I drilled, because this really ensured that all the pieces were level. So everywhere there was a pocket hole, we put a pocket hole screw, and from there, everything started to come together pretty quickly. So there's still so much more to do, but I think we made some really good progress. And honestly, while I was assembling this, I was just getting so excited because I've literally wanted to do this project for so long. So I'm really grateful that I was able to take some of those classes on Craftsy to get myself prepared for this project. So let me take a moment to just thank them for sponsoring this video today. As I mentioned in part 1 of the Breakfast Nook Makeover, I was taking some woodworking classes on Craftsy to just learn the basics of furniture building to build up my confidence for this project so that I could be really efficient with Dalton's time, as he's super busy and has limited time to to help me with this. So I was really glad that I finished the benches and boxes class because it was a really great starting point to get familiar with structural building styles and tools that I needed to accomplish this project. If you don't know, Craftsy is an online community for all things creative. They have over 2,000 classes in like 20 different categories that range from sewing and painting and woodworking to even cooking and baking. There is a super broad range of crafts taught through instructional videos led by experts. But their classes aren't for beginners just like me. As I mentioned, they have a super wide range of topics that address different skill levels, so I think it's really awesome that Craftsy is offering my viewers a really awesome deal. The first 1,000 of you to click the link down in my description will get a full year of premium Craftsy for only $1.49, which is seriously so affordable. So if you've even been remotely thinking about starting a craft over the holiday season or maybe in the new year, then I highly recommend you join Craftsy because it's honestly so much fun. So thank you so much to Craftsy for sponsoring this video so I can get this bench done, and I will follow up with you guys in the morning. Okay, so good morning from my messy breezeway. It is about 7 a.m. and like 40 degrees, so I am super numb, but we woke up early because I just need to get started early. There's so much to do. So as you can see, I completed this short end of the bench that'll go under the big picture window, and it's left open on the end because then that needs to connect to the longer side of the bench, which I have created. I just need to finish the top of it and add that on, and then we'll connect the two pieces. Before any of that happens, I need to go to Lowe's and get some pieces of wood that will actually cover the front of this so that it'll look like an aesthetically pleasing piece of furniture that has a nice wood grain and a stain and all that good stuff. If we can finish all of that, then we'll get to adding the top with the hinges on it. So there is so much to do, so let's get into it. So we went to Lowe's to choose some plywood for the lids and the facade or the veneer, and I really wanted to get some birch plywood because it has like minimal veining, but they didn't have large enough pieces. So I opted for maple plywood instead because maple is a really nice hardwood. It also stains really well, and it was the most affordable next step up from birch. So I just had to go through a lot of pieces to find one piece that had very minimal imperfections on just one side, because one piece of this will be enough to cover the entire facade of the bench. We're not going to cover the backside as you're not going to see it. For the facade, I chose 1/4-inch plywood to save some money since it's not structural. And for the lid, I went with 1/2-inch plywood for added sturdiness while still staying within my budget. Otherwise, I probably would have gotten a 3/4-inch. However, I think our structure is sturdy enough that it doesn't need to be more than 1/2 inch. And we're going to cut the majority of this at home, but we're using the giant saw at Lowe's so that we can fit it into my brother-in-law's truck. Alrighty, so we have finished constructing both sides of the bench, but now we're moving on to putting the veneer on the outside, and I'm just going to call it a veneer. It's basically a 1/4 inch of maple. It's super thin, and we're just going to glue it on the outside. But in order to make sure that the veneer will adhere to the frame in a really flush and level way, I'm just going to sand everything down to make it smooth so that it adheres properly. Once I was done with that, we moved on to what we call ripping the wood. We basically cut down these larger pieces so that they would fit the end caps and the long and short side of the front of the bench. And Dalton brought this really cool portable track saw piece that we just connected to his circular saw. It also came with a clamp that you could connect to the table to keep it sturdy. And then each of us measured the wood before we cut it to make sure that it was going to be correct. Then we cut it, then we measured it again to make sure that we got the right cut. Then we dry fit it to make sure that it was actually going to fit on the frame.
That's good.
So I didn't see this, but there seems to be like a mineral deposit on the wood here, which won't come out with sanding. So what we're gonna do is cut off the edge here and then only use this middle piece, which is really nice, all the way up to this knot right here because I don't wanna use this. So these are gonna be our two end caps that go on the edges of the bench over here. Okay, so you don't have to watch me cut wood twice. I took this 1/2-inch piece of plywood and cut a short side and a long side. So now we have two lids for our storage that are also going to double as the seat. But I did want to mention that we left a little lip on the inside so that it would be easy to open and close. While we were at Lowe's, we looked at the different hinges available and we were trying to find something, of course, affordable and something aesthetically pleasing. I wanted to go with like silver, even though you're not going to really see it. And we thought of a piano hinge, but doing something long like this would actually require you to be super accurate with your placement of the hinge so that it doesn't skew one way or another. So to distribute the weight and just leave a little bit more room for error, it's better that we add multiple hinges. So on the longer piece, we're adding 3, and on the shorter piece, we're adding 2. So we found these galvanized steel hinges, but we needed to make sure that they were inset on the bench so that the lid would lay completely flat on the frame. So the solution to make the lid completely flush with the bench was to use a router, and Dalton created this little jig at home with just a really thin piece of plywood. So he counted for the plastic shield here on the router and the depth and width of the little hinge so that it would sit flat and flush with the 2x4. So the point of this jig is that no matter where we move the router, it's going to create the perfect shape for the hinge. To make sure that the depth was correct, he lowered the little router pin so that it would create a groove that was deep enough as we needed to fit the hinge flush with the 2x4. So the best way to make sure that these hinges were going to be in the same spot on the lid as they are on the frame was to put the lid on the frame and pencil mark where those hinges are. And then we took the lid over to the table, clamped the jig, and centered it into where the middle of the hinge would be. And luckily we figured it out. Okay, so we have the top on with the hinges, but then I realized I don't have screws short enough to screw into the lid so that the screw doesn't come out. So I need to go to Home Depot to get some like 3/8 inch screws, and then got to bring this thing inside. And once I know that it's all working and fitting, then we'll move forward. But today was a long day. I think I've been going at this from like 7 till now it's about 3 o'clock, and I'm going to take a break. So I will follow up with you guys the next time I see you, and we'll get this all finished. So after we spent some time resting later that evening, Dalton and I mitered the edges of the long and short plywood pieces that will be the facade of the bench. I wanted the edges of these plywood pieces to connect seamlessly with a mitered edge because I think it will give this DIY bench a more refined look and less of a DIY look. Plus, it'll just make it look like a solid built-in piece of furniture. I wanted to use his circular saw versus mine because his also cuts at a 45-degree angle, so it was much more versatile than a stationary miter saw for a wide piece of wood like this. But I do have to say that freehanding a circular miter saw is absolutely terrifying, and it's very hard to create a level cut and totally requires some kind of jig to keep you straight, but even then it's really easy to mess up. Wow, that's actually the cleanest one. TBH. It might be off.
Let's see. A tiny little bit of wobble, but no, I mean, that seems like it was
no, Dalton,
great.
that's pretty super
Oh my
pro.
god.
That seems like it was great. All right, there you go. You're
Look
good.
at that.
Epic. So it's the next day and I'm just testing out some stains that I really like on an offcut piece to make sure that I'm really going to like the color. But then I remembered that I really enjoy mixing colors versus just taking one color out of the can. So I put down some honey stain on top of this provincial and I absolutely loved it. It was so warm, but I wanted to see what application would be best. And you can see here that if I put the honey down first and then the provincial on second, it would give me a completely different color. So I'm going to do a full layer of provincial, then I'm going to add a layer of honey. But first I need to add some pre-stained wood conditioner just to make sure that everything goes on really smoothly and doesn't have a blotchy look, because again, we're going for a high-end refined look with this bench. So the reason I opted for an oil brush for this staining job is because a lot of the pigment actually sits at the bottom of the can, even if you're like shaking it. And I really wanted that super saturated color on here. So I made sure to like stir while I was kind of scraping the bottom of the can and then put this really thick layer of stain on. And then once I rubbed it in with a towel, it looked really good. So as you can see, this provincial stain is really nice, but it kind of has a more like grayish undertone. But when I bring in this honey that has a very deep orangey red tone, it just completely changes the look of the wood. It almost has that really nice teak look that I love in mid-century furniture. And I wouldn't have been able to accomplish this with just the honey stain because it's actually quite orange on its own. Probably deduce that I did not use a nail gun to attach this veneer to the frame because I just wanted it to look like a solid piece of wood. I didn't want to have to put in some wood filler because even the stainable wood filler is really hard to match and it does sometimes show. So I'm just trying to be as discreet as possible to give that more refined look. So I just made sure to use an excess amount of this glue. This is really good glue, but I also wanted to just smear it around with my fingers. I didn't want to take up any of the glue with a cloth or brush as those are super absorbent. And we're on a budget here, so I'm just trying to make a little bit of glue go a long way. So I made sure to saturate every part of the frame and then I aligned it to make sure that it was exactly where it needed to be and then just clamped it a bunch of times to make sure it was super tight. I left it like this for a couple of hours and then I moved on to each side one by one and did the same process. Alrighty, it is a new day and it's a day that I've been kind of avoiding because I feel like I'm not going to find the fabric of my dreams out there. I've bookmarked a few places on Google Maps and I'm definitely going to check out Joann's because it's probably more affordable than elsewhere. But I'm really just nervous that I'm not going to find anything that's like kind of stylish and also affordable. So we'll go to Joann's to pick up some cushion and like batting to go underneath the fabric. And then we'll see what they have. And if not, I'm going to go check out some other places and hopefully I'm not going to spend $50 a yard on fabric. And hopefully it's going to match somewhat of what I'm envisioning in my mind. So let's go out there and see what I can find. I saw these three that were okay, that kind of had an interesting minimal geometric pattern, and they had the same general color palette that my breakfast nook has, which is exactly what I'm looking for, but I just really didn't feel strongly about purchasing any of these. So I drove quite a ways to this gigantic fabric outlet, and they have hundreds of fabrics, and I literally looked at every single one, I am not lying to you, and I found some really nice fabrics, but they were all kind of generally like $25 to $38, sometimes $18 a yard, and I'm needing about maybe 4 yards or 5 yards just to have some extra on hand. And so I just can't spend that much right now. So I needed to find something a little bit more affordable. So I headed over to their clearance section where they have a bunch of bolts that are kind of on their way out. They're never going to be reproduced again, or they just have like random cutoff pieces from people's other projects. And I came across this one that had a really nice just pinstripe. The color was very muted, but felt very in line with the color tone and palette that I have in the breakfast nook. So I thought I would take a risk on it because it was only $5 a yard. Alrighty, I have secured my fabric and I am ready to get started on this project. I have never done an upholstery project this big before, but I have done many upholstery projects before, so it should be pretty straightforward. At the fabric store, I also picked up some fabric adhesive spray, so maybe that'll come in handy. But yeah, this is all going to be an experiment, so let's get into it. So when I was at Joann's, I picked up 2 long pieces of 3-inch foam and some batting to go around the foam. So I'm just measuring a few times to make sure I get a straight line, and then I'm literally using an electric knife that you would cut bread with that I got at a garage sale one time. And this is honestly a suggested way to cut upholstery foam. So I'm just cutting alongside a ruler extremely slow. I've just sped up these clips like 4 times. And it doesn't really matter if you're doing this project that the edges get a little bit uneven, because once you put the batting on top and then the fabric on top of that, it's really not going to show at all. It matters more that you put more accuracy and time into making sure that you have the correct measurement of the foam, considering it's kind of a fluid moving piece. So having a really flat surface and measuring like 5 or 6 times, which is what I did, really worked to my advantage. So for the purpose of upholstery, it's really important to have a piece of wood underneath so that you can staple in the fabric and just keep everything feeling level on the seat. But of course, I'm always trying to save some money, especially on this project as it was quite expensive. So instead of purchasing more plywood, even like the low grade one, I went with some MDF. This was literally like $6 or $7 for one sheet. So I got 2 sheets and I just used my circular saw and cut over with some painter's tape so that it wouldn't chip, and used this as the base of my cushion. So if you were to literally put some fabric over this green turquoise foam, it would look exactly like that. So you need batting in order to smooth it out and just give it a little extra cushion and shape. So I used some of this fabric adhesive spray to connect the MDF to the foam. And then I thought stapling the foam to the board would be the best way to go about it. But then I thought maybe I should just use that spray to connect the foam and the batting. And honestly, it worked out really well. This is exactly the purpose of using this type of spray, is that it really adheres to fabric materials really well. So it was very easy to connect these 2 pieces. The following day, I just cut down an additional piece of MDF for the other cushion, but I had to cut 2 pieces and put them together because I realized that this MDF was not long enough after the fact. So maybe in the future, I'll end up getting a piece of plywood and replacing it, but for now, I'm just going to do 2 pieces of MDF, and so far, it's working. This time around, I knew what I was doing, so this was the easiest way to adhere it. It was so much more simple than what I tried the night before, so you live and you learn. Once I flipped it over, I could just spray in the little gaps that I missed, and it really adhered so quickly. And then the final step here before adding fabric on top is just to cut off any extra foam, because it's just going to make it unnecessarily big. The batting should be just about the same size as the foam. Any bigger and you're just going to lose uniformity between the 2 cushions. So I've done a few upholstery tutorials and projects on this channel, so I'll link those below if you're in any way interested, but this was pretty straightforward. I just gave myself some extra fabric on every side to pull it tight. Then I put 1 staple in every side to just keep it in place, and then I just kept pulling it tight and stapling it. I think the thing that I struggled with the most is I wanted the corner of the cushion to not look like it was DIY'd and just folded fabric. So I did a lot of finessing and the best job that I could to kind of create a square edge. And it wasn't the easiest, but it definitely turned out okay. It's really hard to upholster a linear pattern, and for some reason I keep doing it, but it's just because it looks really nice. You just have to be so careful to line everything up, and honestly this fabric was a little bit thinner than most like thick upholstery fabrics. This fabric probably is better for like a decorative pillow than it is for a cushion. However, I asked the lady at the fabric store and she said this would still work for like a mildly used like cushion seat and not maybe like a everyday family room couch. So I think it'll be okay. So I think I could remake these in the future, and the bottom would be plywood instead of MDF, and I maybe would just get the cushion itself professionally upholstered so that it would look really, really pristine. But I'm really proud with how this turned out, honestly. But without further ado, let me show you what the final bench looks like in this room. I am absolutely obsessed with it. bench just totally ground this room and give it like that finishing touch it really needed. This is what I initially envisioned when I started making over this room, and I couldn't be happier or prouder of this space. I also think that removing the chairs got rid of a cluttered kind of look, and this bench just seems to be in the perfect spot, so it seems like all the time that we invested into planning and ideation really paid off, because I can easily still open up the cabinet and take stuff out, and I can probably fit 3 to 4 adults on this entire thing. So I might be changing up the table in here in the future, so stay tuned for that. So I think the major takeaways here from building a custom piece of furniture from scratch are: furniture building is really expensive and kind of hard if you've never done it before, but it is so worth the investment of time and money because it is just a really rewarding experience. I probably would have invested more money into this project if I owned this home and made this an official built-in bench, but for a renter-friendly bench, this is absolutely amazing. I think this space is always going to be evolving and changing, but I'm so much happier with where it is now from where it began, and it feels so much more connected to the living room and the dining room now. But it has its own vibe and it doesn't feel redundant to the sofa or the dining table. If you're loving this space as much as I do, then definitely give this video a thumbs up. It really does help out the channel. And if you want more DIY makeover and thrifting content, there's plenty on this channel, but you can also subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified of when I upload videos in the future. If you're still waiting to get some Christmas gifts, I just uploaded a thrifted gift guide, which I think has some really fun, unique thrifted gift combinations to just make your Christmas shopping a little bit more fun, creative, and affordable. I'm not sure if I'll upload another video this year. I can't believe the year is over. I really just want to enjoy the holidays and find some rest and just relaxation so that I can recharge and fill up my cup. I'm definitely going to do some winter gardening to get the garden prepped for spring, which I'm so excited about. And I'm also going to be definitely doing some thrifting and estate sailing and some other fun stuff. And I already have videos queued up that I'm currently working on, so I'll put them out when they're ready. But other than that, thank you so much for spending the year with me, and I really appreciate you hanging out, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.